Sounds good. We'll get started here again. Got a action-packed or fun-filled discussion hosted by our friends over at Vanguard. Folks, want to thank you for taking the time. Last time we had a webinar, we're in the midst of the throes of the market sell-off around the tariffs. Should be a little bit less exciting of a conversation, but no less impactful. I spent the morning poring over the House's bill, which has a number of goodies on the tax side, which probably will further the case for why a Roth conversion might make sense. Some of those things like bumping the SALT cap up to $40,000 or increasing the standard deduction are just two of those things. There's also a nice little exemption for about $4,000 of income for Social Security. So if you're going to get some opportunity to exempt some money from federal taxes, might not be the worst thing to turn around and use that towards a Roth conversion. But kidding aside, thank you for your time. I know in some parts of the country we're getting ready for the beach, although our guests joining from New Hampshire are actually looking at snow. Crazy to think about here in May. But again, thank you for your precious time this afternoon. We're very happy to have subject matter expert join us. Maddie will go ahead and introduce Julia. Again, we'll look for an opportunity to have some good questions and or some topic, and then good discussion on the topic, then open up at the end for questions and answers. Maddie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We are so excited to have Julia joining us from Vanguard today. Julia currently serves as Vanguard's financial planning and coaching strategist responsible for growing and enhancing financial planning offerings designed to support Vanguard's financial advisor partners like Breakwater Capital Group. And Julia has been with Vanguard since 2008. She has played multiple roles. She's assisted financial advisors with their investment strategy, practice management, sales needs. She's also offered investment solutions, portfolio construction guidance for financial advisors while managing Vanguard ETFs and model portfolio services. Prior to Vanguard, Julia was a financial specialist and credit manager at Wells Fargo Financial. She also earned her Bachelor's of Science in Finance and Marketing from Bloomsburg University. We are thrilled to have her with us. She's certainly a subject matter expert, and I will give the floor to her to kick us off here.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks for attending today. Today we're going to talk about Roth accounts, Roth conversions. And I'm thinking back to the 90s when Roths first came about. So I was working in a job making $4.25 an hour. That was like the minimum wage back in the 90s. And Roths were new. And my father was always trying to teach me about investing. And he says, in the future, you might work for an employer that they're going to match you when you save for retirement. So you don't get that right now in your part-time job. But for every dollar that you put into what we call a Roth IRA, I'm going to match it 100%. And from that experience, I would put $20 in, he would put $20 in, and that account has been growing tax-free ever since. That's the way I had my first experience with investing. So for people as a parent, when you have your high schooler getting their first job, I thought it was a great way to teach about investing and about employer matches. Never give up the match. Obviously, 100% is unreasonable, but when you're making $4 an hour, how much are you really going to put in there? And a lot of people think about Roths and they say, well, Roth accounts, those are for people, they have income limitations on what you can put in there. Those are for people like that make $4 an hour. But we're going to talk about the appeal of Roth conversions. Now, regardless of your income levels, anyone can do this conversion. So why you would consider that. And then Vanguard, we have some research that we call the break-even tax rate to give you some additional considerations to decide, are you a candidate that should consider having more Roth assets? So to get us started, when we retire, and we start taking required minimum distributions at age 73, and all of a sudden we trigger some more taxes in retirement. So what you're looking at right here, this is just a visual that's representing just a little dollar of income can really trigger additional taxes. And this is what we call IRMA surcharges on your Medicare premiums. So you turn 65, maybe you transition on to Medicare, and they are going to price you higher for what you're going to pay into Medicare if you have higher income. So a lot of people say, oh, geez, Roth, when I take money out of that account, it doesn't hit my tax return, but my pre-tax retirement assets, like traditional IRAs, I'm going to have to take a required minimum distribution. And if it's high and it throws my income higher, now I'm triggering additional taxes in retirement. So some people are thinking about their future scenario and planning, saying, okay, what is my required minimum distribution going to be well in the future? Am I somebody that's going to see additional triggers with taxes? Well, the benefits of having Roth assets are you can take tax-free withdrawals in retirement. So it gives you flexibility. One thing I want you to think about is if you are married, one day in the future, it may be you, it may be your spouse, but one of you may be a single filer. And single filers get sometimes hit with additional taxes and it changes your tax scenario. So some people do Roths as a way to hedge. Okay, we want to give more flexibility for those tax-free withdrawals in retirement, especially if we're a single filer and our tax situation looks different. The other thing that is top of mind for people these days are around estate planning. There was something that got passed called the Secure Act. And the biggest thing that came out of the Secure Act is if your adult children inherit your IRA, your retirement assets, they will need to liquidate those retirement assets over a 10-year period. So if they're inheriting a sizable account, that could be a real tax bomb if it's a traditional IRA and they have to liquidate it within 10 years. So some people are thinking about Roth to leave a tax-free legacy. I want to leave Roth accounts to my very successful heirs. They're going to be in their peak earnings years at the time of my death. It would be nice for them to be able to wait another 10 years, blow out of that position, and have all that tax-free income. Because you can lock in the tax rates of today and prepay your taxes instead of paying them later in life. And you can end with a lot more on an after-tax basis. So just to show you, to give you an idea of where we stand today, and I apologize if this is small, I'm going to make this as big as I can. So for, as I was talking about single filers versus married filing jointly. So we live in this progressive tax system that you only pay the 10% federal tax up to that $11,925. Then you move into the 12% bracket on this band. So they call that progressive. Well, you can see the 24% federal rate ends at 197,300. When you're married, you can have up to $394,600 in that 24% bracket. So when we were saying, hey, sometimes your spouse passes away and your income is 300,000 and you're put in a different tax situation where you're going to be paying more in federal taxes. With Roth accounts, you don't need to pay that. So when you go and you sit down with your accountant and you ask them, and it's funny, I did this with my accountant this year. So I do go to someone that does my taxes. I'm a little lazy. I could probably do them myself, but I like them to do it for me. And I said, hey, I just want your opinion. I want you to review my situation and see if you think I'm doing the right thing and how much I'm deferring to Roth versus my pre-tax retirement accounts. And immediately my accountant said, don't do Roth. It was immediate, no questions asked. This is the traditional rule of thumb. Okay, what he said to me, because I said, so why are you saying that? And he said, most people, when they retire, they have a lower federal tax rate. So this is assuming somebody today is in the 35% bracket. That's a high federal bracket. And in the future, hey, they expect to be in the 30% federal bracket. And the way you estimate this is you look out into the future, you say, what's my required minimum distribution going to be? Let's add in my, dividends, my capital gains, some of my Social Security income. Let's get an idea and look at the tax rates of today to ballpark what it's going to be. But if you're expecting to be in a higher tax bracket in retirement, you can see that Roth makes more sense. So this is the traditional rule of thumb that, hey, if you expect tax rates in the future to be lower than they are today, you might be better off just staying in the pre-tax account. And that's where the accountant tends to go. So when you have a traditional IRA and you're able to deduct that on your tax return, you get some tax savings in that year. But then at the end of the period, you're ready to withdraw that money. Let's say it's 20 years in the future. Now you have to pay tax depending on what your federal income tax rate is at the time. With Roth, you're not going to get that tax deduction. You're paying the tax today. And then in the future, you pull that money out and it is tax free. So this is where Vanguard, we really nerded out on some research here called the break-even tax rate. So what's that's saying is there is a rate in the future that you would be indifferent to doing a Roth conversion. Like it doesn't matter. So what is that it doesn't matter number? So today your tax rate is 35%, but your break-even tax rate in the future is 23.5%. So what that means is if you think in the future your federal income tax rates are going to be higher than this, then you really should consider a Roth conversion. If you think it's going to be lower than this, then it doesn't really make sense to do a conversion. So my father is someone that he did everything he was told. He saved really well. He maximized everything. He got a pension. He waited till 70 for his Social Security benefits. And now he's like, I'm in a worse tax situation now than I was when I was working full time. I really wish I had more Roth assets and I had done this a while back. He recently helped my sister buy a house and he liquidated his Roth account so he didn't have a big tax bomb go out, and now he doesn't have as much flexibility. So when you do a Roth conversion, which you are allowed to do at any time, let's say you have a traditional IRA and you want to convert that over to a Roth, the tax bill is going to be due in the tax year. So you do it in 2025, hey, you are going to owe tax dollars. And a lot of people say, well, I'm just going to hold that tax bill. I'm going to just take it out of the IRA. Keep in mind, if you are under 59 and a half, you will face a penalty to pay the tax bill out of the IRA. So paying out of the IRA, it's usually not the best thing. If you have outside assets to pay the tax bill, that's usually the better way to go. So you do $10,000, that's going to add $10,000 onto your tax return. It could throw you into a higher federal bracket, and you're going to have a tax bill on that for that tax year. But what we really think, if you're somebody that has a taxable account, so let's say you have a lot of money sitting in a money market, And I'm going to be really generous here and say that money market is going to pay you 6%, and you're going to get that 6% a year for 20 years. So we know that's unreasonable, but we're going to just give it to you and say you're going to get 6% for 20 years. Well, you're in a high federal bracket. You're in the 35% bracket. So you have two options. You can take your $1 million traditional IRA balance and you can just set it and forget it. And that $350,000 in that high yielding money market is going to grow over time. And when we look out 20 years in the future and we say, hey, your IRA grew by 6% a year, your 350,000 also grew by 6% a year, but guess what? That $350,000 came with a tax bill each year. It doesn't print on our statement, our tax bill, but at tax time, you have to pay. You got 6% on your money market, you owe the federal government. So that would be eroded away by taxes. Also, that $1 million that has grown, you take that out in retirement, you owe a tax bill. So let's say you spent this $350,000 and paid the tax bill. What you would get is the left-hand side, your $1 million. You don't have the 350,000 anymore. You gave that to the tax man, but everything grew tax-free. So 20 years in the future, you're at 3.2 million versus the 2.8 million after tax snapshot when we compare. So this just goes to show time is always on your side when it comes to Roth. The more time we have, the more tax deferred growth we can get. So things to think about when you're thinking about starting a Roth conversion strategy. So my example on the other page, that's assuming that you are being smart about converting that $1 million over time. If you were to convert $1 million in one tax year, it's going to throw you into the highest federal bracket. You're going to pay a lot more in taxes than you need to. So some people look and say, you know what, maybe you work off of commissions and you were out a lot this year and you're like, you know what, my income isn't as high as it typically is. That's a good time to think about converting. When the markets are a little choppy and, we had the tariffs earlier in this year, that excites me. When we finally have some market volatility, we have some swings, hey, I can convert when the market is down, throw that into a Roth, and then when the market rebounds like it did, you just got all that growth tax-free. So it's always fun with like market volatility to do some of those Roth conversions. Also, if you are charitably inclined and you are going to be, let's say you're itemizing on your tax return, you're doing a big charitable contribution to a donor advised fund. Well, you're going to get to write that off on your taxes. You're itemizing. Some people will marry this all together and do the Roth conversion knowing that they're going to be donating to charity, and that can offset your tax bill. The other thing I want you to be aware of, because there are taxes triggered when we do Roth conversions, and this is something to talk to your accountant, because I mentioned earlier my accountant. After we had a conversation, and I said, you didn't ask me anything about my future situation. And by the end of our meeting, he said, I think you should do more Roth than you're doing. So context matters. If your accountant isn't asking a boatload of questions about your future situation, what your RMD is projected to be, they might not be taking all factors into consideration. But let's say you do a Roth conversion. We already talked about your federal taxes. You might be in a state that also will have state taxes. So we have to take that into consideration. Then there is also something called the net investment tax. So what this is we needed a way to fund the Affordable Care Act. And one of the ways they did this is they said, hey, we're going to look, and for people that are single and their modified adjusted gross income hits 200,000, And then for married couples, your modified adjusted gross income hits $250,000. We are going to start surcharging you. They call it the net investment tax or the Medicare surtax. We're going to charge you 3.8% on your investment income. But of course, we have to make this overly complicated. What they say is we're going to charge the 3.8% on the lesser of your investment income or the amount you go over this threshold. And the reason why Roth conversions trigger this is, let's say you're married filing jointly and you're usually around $200,000, and then you do $100,000 Roth conversion. Now you're at 300,000. So you are $50,000 over the 250, and your investment income is only $40,000. They will say 3.8% of the $40,000 of investment income. So investment income, you have dividends, you have capital gains. Munis do not count towards that. So sometimes your advisor is managing to this and putting you in investments to make sure we, avoid some of this surtax. So if you pull out your tax return, you'll see it on there if you're paying it, that 3.8%. So Roth conversions can trigger this, something to keep in mind. The other thing I want you to be aware of is if you are 65 or older and you are on Medicare, and if you're disabled, you might be under 65, but for most of us, this is for our 65-plus-year-olds. Let's say you do a Roth conversion, and again, you're doing $100,000, and it throws the extra income on your tax return. You're married filing jointly, and it puts you over $212,000. What they're going to do is they're going to charge you more. They call it an income-related monthly adjustment amount. They're going to charge you more on a monthly basis for your Medicare premiums. So if you are married, filing jointly, you're both on Medicare, all of these numbers are ×2, and it's monthly, so we want to look at the year. Your Medicare premiums are going to reset annually, but this is another tax that we take into consideration when you're doing a Roth conversion. And a lot of times, it still makes sense. We just think of it like a tax, but some people really get anchored on, my Medicare premium is a lot higher. It's coming out of my Social Security check. And we want to be aware that this is another thing that can be triggered by doing that Roth conversion. But as we discussed earlier, that the federal tax brackets are a little bit more favorable for a married couple than over single filers. So some people are looking at, hey, we have a big age gap between us, and I'm probably going to die first, and I want to give you more tax flexibility. Let's start doing the Roth conversion strategy. Let's do this over a series of years. Then in the future, you go on Medicare, and we just looked at those surcharges. Well, you take money out of your Roth, it doesn't hit your tax return. It's not going to affect your Medicare premiums. And then also, what happens is you turn 73, you don't have to be forced to take money out of your retirement accounts. There's no required minimum distributions on Roth accounts. So you can take money out of there, or you can just let it ride. So when we're thinking about estate planning, some people will do this and they say, hey, I'm subject to the 40% federal estate tax. So right now we're looking at this, they're calling it the One Big Beautiful Bill, that it just got signed by the House late last night. I guess it would count as today. I think it was the early morning of today. They signed it. And what they're looking to do is they're going to say $15 million per person is the lifetime exemption amount. So you can gift that during your life or at your death. So both you will get that, your spouse will get that. So $15 million per person, $30 million per couple. If you're above that, you can face a 40% federal estate tax after you pass away. So some people say, hey, if I do this Roth conversion, I can remove money from that 40% bucket where I can write a check. Let's say I'm in the 24% federal bucket. I can write a check and pay that and take some of that money out of the 40% bucket. And then my heirs will get this tax free. So thinking about your beneficiaries got a little bit more important after the Secure Act. In the past, prior to the Secure Act, where they're saying, hey, adult children have to liquidate the IRA in a 10-year period, you used to be able to stretch over your lifetime. So my father-in-law passed away in 2008, and my husband was the beneficiary of his retirement assets. He takes a small distribution each year and his account can keep growing. He can use that for his own retirement. Now the rules are a lot different. He would have had to, if the Secure Act went into effect prior to 2008, that IRA would have been totally liquidated by 2018 and we'd have it in a taxable account. So the government needs their tax dollars. So when do people usually think about converting to Roth? So when we look at numbers that we can see, we see a lot of people that are young professionals that are doing these Roth conversions. And the reason being, usually people learn pretty quickly that you can contribute to a Roth, but then once you start making a lot more money, you're not eligible to directly to contribute to a Roth anymore. And a lot of people switch jobs. Hey, in their 20s, they work a couple years, switch to another job, and they are rolling over their 401ks into a traditional IRA. And they have some money sitting there, and they want to take advantage of what they call backdoor Roth contributions. If you have, let's say, $100,000 sitting there in a traditional IRA because you switched jobs a couple times, you can't really take advantage of the backdoor Roth strategy. Because when you go to convert to a Roth, you're going to have to pay tax on that amount. There's something called a pro rata rule. So a lot of people are doing these conversions so they can take advantage of that backdoor Roth. Then we're seeing people after they retire, their income drops, their required minimum distributions haven't started yet because that's more like 73 to 75. So they have some lower income years. So they're converting to try to reduce their required minimum distributions, prepay some of their taxes in those low income years. So we talked about the break-even tax rate. We don't know. Tax policy is always changing. As of right now, they're trying to make our federal income taxes permanent. But it's kind of laughable because, like, what is it ever permanent? This just means it won't expire in a certain year. But a new regime can come in the future and they could change tax policy again. So it's so uncertain. Like, I don't know what my future tax rate is going to be. That's where the break-even tax rate comes in, that we say we're going to take into account the assets that you have in a taxable account, and we're going to look at the full picture and tell you how far would your federal income tax rate have to fall in the future to make you not consider doing Roth. So if your future tax rate is greater than this break-even tax rate, that's when you would consider doing a conversion. So how you pay the conversion taxes really matter here. We talked about if you pay from the IRA, that's usually the least desirable. And the way we think about this is, what's my current tax rate? What's my future tax rate expected to be? And whatever your current tax rate is, that's going to be your break-even tax rate. So this example here has somebody in the 35% federal bracket. Well, you could pay from a tax-efficient portfolio. So talk to your financial advisor about how your taxable money is invested. But an example of a tax-efficient portfolio would be, let's say you buy individual stocks and you just don't sell them. You hold them for a long time. You have an ETF strategy that basically you only have to pay a tax bill on the dividends, and you're going to have long-term capital gains, not short-term. That will be tax efficient. Tax inefficient would be, hey, I have short-term capital gains. I'm trading stocks and I'm not holding them for a full year. I have fully taxable corporate bonds. That would be another example. Very tax inefficient. You pay federal income taxes on all of that each year. So the break-even tax rate tends to be lower if we're going to pay our conversion taxes out of a tax inefficient portfolio or cash. So usually cash is the best way to pay, followed by tax inefficient, followed by your tax efficient portfolio when we're thinking of the order of how you would pay your tax. Keep in mind, some people that they're covered by a workplace plan, you are not eligible to deduct your traditional IRA contributions. So you put $7,000 in a traditional IRA. If you didn't have a workplace plan, you could deduct it on your tax return. But if you do have that workplace plan and your income is on the higher side, you can do a non-deductible IRA contribution. This results in what they call basis, that you have money in there that's not taxable. So commonly people don't have a lot of basis, but if you had quite a lot of basis, this just means that your tax bill will be a lot lower if you do a Roth conversion. Some people will, what they'll look to do is, if your plan, let's say you have a 401k plan, they allow in-service withdrawals. Sometimes they'll allow you to take your IRA, take the pre-tax portion of it and port it over into your 401k so you can do a Roth conversion for just the basis and not owe a tax bill. Not every plan is going to allow that. But let's say you do a full Roth conversion. And I apologize, this is a couple years old, my numbers in here. But if you do a full Roth conversion, you're now eligible for a backdoor Roth strategy. So if you meet certain income thresholds, some people can contribute right to the Roth IRA. Here's my $7,000. I'm just putting it directly in the Roth, way easier. But if your income is higher and you don't have a big pile of traditional IRA money sitting there blocking you from doing this strategy, you can make that non-deductible contribution to an IRA. Then you convert it to a Roth IRA, and you don't have to pay a tax bill because hopefully we put it in something that didn't have a lot of growth in a day or two. And it's a way to backdoor into the Roth. So it's like you're doing a Roth conversion, but just for your annual contribution. And it's a way to backdoor in when your income is too high. So what I want you to take away from this is understand that Roth, what it's giving you is tax-free growth over your lifetime. You don't have to have RMDs when you retire. You have more flexibility, especially if you become a single filer. And a lot of people are now thinking about Roth accounts as a legacy planning tool, knowing that their children are successful and going to be in high tax brackets, and they want to leave them a tax-free legacy, especially if you're someone that you are in a lower tax bracket. You could be 24% or below. Most of the time, you are not going to convert all in 1 year. You're going to look at your thresholds and convert a little bit over time. Because a lot of people decide, hey, I'm going to pay the taxes today, lock in my tax rate for the future benefit. And it can be a really valuable financial planning strategy. And we have to take into account all the taxes we will pay, but like that net investment tax, the IRMA surcharges. But a lot of people, after they look at the whole tax analysis, they say this is worth it for the long term. I'm in it for the long haul. So I apologize. Some of this was really nerdy with our nerdy break-even tax rates, but I can stop sharing and see if we have any questions.
One of the questions that we had, Julie, and we get this a lot, is can I get access to my Roth IRA before I'm 59 and a half?
So you are able to take out what you contributed to it initially. So let's say you put in $7,000. You'll have access to that $7,000, but what you can't take out is the growth on that $7,000. You have to meet a 5-year rule and to get the full tax advantage if you just opened up your Roth. Keep in mind a Roth conversion, it starts the 5-year rule again. So every conversion you do starts that 5-year rule. Once you're 59 and a half, you can withdraw money from that without a penalty. And we're talking your earnings. But if you're under 59 and a half, you will face a penalty if you're trying to take your earnings out. So you do have the flexibility to put in whatever you contributed. You can pull that out without having a tax consequence. They always do contributions first, then conversion amount, then earnings third.
Perfect. Thanks, Julie. I really appreciate that. Any other questions?
We have a question, sorry, make sure I'm not on mute here, related to the stretch provisions, which I'll handle. So again, hopefully we all live long enough that they revisit that, going from a life expectancy stretch to 10 years seems somewhat draconian, but there are provisions relate to minor children, chronically ill or disabled, which allow that stretch provision to remain intact. Again, very unique circumstances. Sometimes people say, well, hey, if I'm a parent, actually my grandparent, could I name my grandchildren who are minors as the beneficiaries to get the stretch provision? It's very specific, but again, if you happen to be taking leaving assets to a minor child, they have the ability to use the stretch provision. But if it's a minor grandchild or something like that, you do not. But for the chronically ill and disabled, they get to use the old stretch rules. I think the logic to some extent being is there's so much disadvantage from an income perspective, but they also potentially don't have the same long life expectancy. But the rules predate or are identical to what the rules were back before the Secure Act was enacted. Just want to call up a couple points relative to the conversion question. We have these conversations seemingly, if not daily, definitely weekly. We have a number of clients where we're in the midst of this ongoing strategy. I think you have to be very honest about where we see tax rates in the future as we're wrestling with a $2 trillion deficit today, which is likely to go up in the near term. Debt levels in the $36-37 trillion territory. It's hard for me to envision that this will be a point where we'll continue to see tax rates go lower over time. We might be at a nadir now, or whatever this bill looks like once the Senate signs off on it and eventually makes its way to the president's desk. So I think there's a case for this is probably the most favorable tax environment. So a conversion could make a lot of sense. Acknowledging that markets are close to all-time highs. I think we're 4% off of where we were back in February. Again, kind of miraculous. I think we got back there. So, converting assets at all-time high doesn't necessarily feel great. But again, it comes back to your personal circumstances. Many folks will see their income drop, from the point in which they're working to retirement. So I think it's very personalized. It's very unique. We did a webinar in the fall last year where we really got into some of the math around the conversions. We used some tax planning software from this company called Holistaplan, where we'll put in some numbers to actually see how that impacts your circumstance. So I guess this is a call out or a request for those folks who are really interested in this. This is surely a conversation that involves probably the work of your accountant and your financial advisor. So we're happy to take you through that if anyone feels really strongly about whether or not it makes sense for them. Like let's roll up our sleeves and take a look at that. I don't necessarily have anything else to add, but we're grateful to have Julia join us today. Maddie, if you wanted to take us home or close out the conversation, I don't see any other thing having come up in the Q&A at this point.
Yeah, the other thing that I'll call out too is everyone's reason for doing a conversion is different. There is no one size fits all solution. There's a client that calls us out and makes sure that she is up to snuff in terms of knowing her strategy and being able to explain that strategy. And that's something that we hold near and dear to our hearts, to make sure that our clients feel comfortable and confident in whatever we're putting in front of them. But just know that your situation and your neighbor's situation may be very different, and your reason for even thinking about this process may be very different. So if you feel like that conversation to Jeff's point have not been fleshed out yet, please let us know. That's something, that we always keep our door open for clients. But Julia, thank you so much. That was quite an informative session. We appreciate you and Vanguard's resources as you continue to support our firm going forward. So thank you. This is being recorded. It will be sent out to all of our clients. And if you feel like someone that is in need of this knowledge, feel free to send it out. But thank you very much. We'll wrap it up here.